Have you ever imagined, one day, the man who once walked away from you coming back, opening the door to your old home, and finding you asleep, holding the child that belongs to both of you? That's how today's story begins, about a billionaire who once thought he had everything, until he realized what he lost was the only thing that ever truly mattered. The story of Vincent and Sloan will take you through nights of loneliness, mornings of forgiveness, and a slow, tender journey to rediscover love in a sunlit house somewhere in the heart of America. Before we begin, leave me a comment, tell me which city you're listening from. And if you love stories like this, full of emotion and quiet warmth, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next part of this journey. Now, sit back, and let me tell you a story about a man who gave up his entire empire to learn how to love again. Dusk settled over Manhattan in shades of amber gold, as if the sun was clinging to its last bit of warmth before disappearing behind the city's glass towers. On the 57th floor of the Devereux Tower, where mirrored walls reflected the fading sky, Vincent Devereux set his suitcase down and exhaled quietly. 3 weeks, 3 continents, 12 meetings, hundreds of contracts. But now, all he could hear was his heart's heavy, hollow rhythm, lost inside a far too quiet penthouse. The apartment hadn't changed much since the day Sloan left. The framed photos still hung neatly on the wall. The white piano still stood in the corner. The crystal vase where she once kept tulips was still empty. Everything seemed frozen when she walked away. Only time had gathered, layering dust on their memories. Vincent shrugged off his coat, loosened his tie, and walked toward the bedroom. He thought a long sleep would silence the tension in his head, but then he stopped. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, he heard a soft, steady sound, breathing. He pushed the door open. Golden light spilled through the thin curtains, falling across the bed, and Vincent's world stopped. Sloan was there. Her honey blonde hair spilled across the white sheets, her face just as he remembered, every freckle, every soft curve. But what froze him was the tiny child in her arms, a baby girl, fast asleep, her chest rising and falling in the rhythm of dreams. Vincent couldn't move. He stood there like a stone. The room was so still that even the ticking of a distant clock sounded loud. Time seemed to hold its breath. Sloan stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered, and when her eyes opened, they met his. Neither spoke for a few long seconds that felt like a lifetime. Vincent's breath caught in his throat. Vincent, just one word. But in that word was everything. Memory, resentment, love, and loss. He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the child. Who is she? His voice was rough, trembling as if he already knew the truth, but feared to hear it. Sloan pulled the baby closer. My daughter. Silence. The last ray of sunlight touched the baby's face, closed eyes, small lips, soft dark hair. And then Vincent saw the curve of her chin and her mouth shape. Familiar. Too familiar. He took a step back. She's... Sloan looked up, her blue eyes, tired but steady. She's yours. Her name is Willa. The suitcase hit the floor. Vincent barely heard it. All he could hear was the pounding in his chest, the flood of memories, their last fight, the nights he stayed at the office, the empty look in her eyes when she signed the divorce papers. He whispered, barely audible, "How long?" 4 weeks. I didn't know. I didn't tell you. A simple sentence, yet it shattered everything. Vincent sat down on the edge of the bed, reaching out with trembling hands. He touched the baby's tiny fingers, soft as morning mist. Willa shifted slightly, then fell back into sleep, her lips parting as if she dreamed of something sweet. Vincent's throat tightened. A strange ache filled his chest, pain, longing, and fear. You shouldn't be here, Sloan said softly. This is my home. Not anymore. Her voice was calm, but it pierced him like a blade. They sat in silence for a long while, broken only by the hum of the heater. Finally, Vincent spoke, his voice low, almost pleading. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you face it alone? Because you said marriage was a mistake. You said you wanted freedom. Remember? I said that because I was scared, not because I didn't love you. Sloane's lips pressed together. She turned away. Scared or not, you still left. And I had to bring a child into this world alone. The words landed sharp and clean, cutting deep. Vincent lowered his head, speechless. In the dim light, he saw what he had missed: the fatigue in her face, the thinness of her hands, the dark circles under her eyes, traces of sleepless nights and quiet battles fought in solitude. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. But Sloan only shook her head. "Sorry doesn't make the pain any less, Vincent." She stood and placed Willa gently in her crib. The last of the daylight faded, leaving only 3 hearts beating separately, yet slowly finding their rhythm in the same quiet room. Night wrapped around Manhattan like a black velvet blanket. On the 57th floor, the lights in the apartment still glowed against the cold marble floor. Vincent sat in silence, eyes fixed on the crib. Every time Willa stirred, he held his breath. He had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, but now, facing fatherhood, he was terrified. Sloan stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a loose sweater. She looked fragile, but her gaze was stronger than he remembered. "You're still awake?" "I'm afraid to sleep. Afraid that if I do, this will all disappear." She smiled faintly. "Nothing disappears, Vincent. But tomorrow, I'm leaving." He turned to her, eyes darkening. "Leaving? Where?" "I don't know yet. I'll find an apartment. I can't stay here." "Why not?" "Because this is your world. I was passing through." He took a step closer. "Don't go. Stay, at least until you find somewhere else." For her? For everything. Only a few steps separated them, yet it felt like 1,000 miles. There was something fragile in how she looked at him, the exhaustion of someone who once believed and was left behind. "What do you want from me, Vincent?" "I don't know. I know I can't leave this room without you and her." Sloan stayed quiet for a long moment. "You once chose your career over me. Success over family. Why choose me now?" "Because I finally understand. None of it means anything if I come home to an empty house." Willa whimpered softly, breaking the silence. Sloan bent down to pick her up, rocking her gently. Vincent watched them and felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. "Peace." "Does she have your last name?" he asked quietly. "Bennett. I didn't want her to carry the name of a father who wasn't there." Vincent nodded, smiled sadly. "Well, I'm here now. Maybe we can choose a new one together." Sloan looked at him for a long time. Her gaze softened, but her voice remained calm. "Names don't matter, Vincent. What matters is whether you'll still be here tomorrow, next week, next year." "I will. You said that once before." Silence fell again. Vincent stepped closer, then stopped. Instead, he looked down at Willa. Her tiny eyes were half open, gazing up at him with innocent wonder. And in that moment, Vincent knew this was his second chance. He reached out and brushed his finger against hers. Sweetheart, Daddy's home." Willa didn't understand, but she held his finger tight. Sloan watched them, her heart twisting. Something in his eyes made her want to believe, though fear lingered. Later, as Sloan rocked Willa to sleep, Vincent stepped out onto the balcony. The city below shimmered with a million dazzling and suddenly distant lights. He once thought this view was the peak of his life. Now, looking down, he felt nothing but emptiness. He wondered how many men were like him, standing between success and loneliness, trading everything away without realizing what they'd lost. The door opened behind him. Sloan stepped out, wrapped in a thin scarf. The night breeze carried the scent of coffee and city smoke. She stood beside him, silent. After a while, she spoke. "I was terrified, Vincent, of giving birth alone, of going to every ultrasound with no one holding my hand." He turned to her, eyes glistening. "I deserve your hatred. I used to hate you. But when Willa was born, I didn't anymore. I just felt sorry for the man who never understood happiness. And now? I don't know. Maybe I still love you. Maybe it's just a memory. But love alone isn't enough, not unless you change." Vincent nodded. "I will, not to earn forgiveness, but to become the kind of father she deserves." "Oh." Sloan looked at him, her eyes softening. The wind kept blowing. The city below stayed bright and alive. And on that high balcony, two people who once lost each other stood side by side again, saying nothing. Only their eyes spoke. And in that quiet exchange lived the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The first morning after Sloan decided to stay, Manhattan was as noisy as ever, as if nothing had ever stopped. But inside that 57th floor penthouse, everything moved at its own pace, slower, softer, and strangely different. Vincent felt as if he were living in another world. He had never heard sounds like these. The faint cry of Willa at dawn, the rush of water as Sloan rinsed a bottle, the smell of coffee mingling with baby powder. The apartment that had always been cold and immaculate now felt alive, warm, messy, and tender, like a real home. Vincent stood in the kitchen, wearing a white shirt, awkwardly holding a baby bottle. He'd read the instructions online the night before, but now, trying to do it himself, he fumbled like a student at his first exam. Sloan walked in and couldn't help laughing. "What are you doing?" "Making formula." "You mean boiling it?" Vincent jumped, quickly turning down the heat. Sloan shook her head, lips curved, trying not to laugh. "Here, let me." Once he watched her every movement practiced, graceful, natural. He realized she'd done this hundreds of times in all those nights when he wasn't there. The thought tightened his chest. Sloan handed him the bottle. "Hold it steady, tilt it a little. Yes, just like that. Don't let air bubbles form." Willa stirred in Vincent's arms, then began to feed contentedly. He felt her fragile, vibrant life pulsing against his own for the first time. So small and yet so strong, he murmured, mostly to himself. "I never thought I'd have a child." "Neither did I," Sloan said softly. "But when Willa came, I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore." The words caught in his throat. He wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but she'd already turned away, quietly folding tiny clothes into a drawer. The room was silent except for the wind brushing against the glass. Morning light fell across Sloane's face, and Vincent watched her longer than he should. She wasn't as radiant as before, but there was something deeper now, the calm of someone who'd weathered storms, the warmth of someone who'd learned what truly matters. That afternoon, they shared their first meal since the divorce. Sloan made simple spaghetti. Vincent sat across from her, hardly believing it was real. "I don't remember you being such a good cook." She smiled faintly. "Because back then, you never ate at home." He fell silent. The words were light, but they hit deep. Willa kicked her feet from her little chair, giggling. Vincent laughed too. "She's got your dimples." "And your eyes," Sloan added softly. "They curve like crescent moons when she smiles." For a moment, the air softened between them. They both smiled like time had folded back to when they were young, still in love and unafraid. That evening, Sloan rocked Willa to sleep while Vincent watched by the doorway. What he felt wasn't desire or regret, but a quiet peace he had never known. He remembered those nights long ago, coming home to find her asleep, the dim light shining over the suit jacket he'd tossed on a chair, her back turned, saying nothing. He had mistaken her silence for calm, never realizing it was a cry he'd ignored. Willa woke and began to cry. Sloan turned. "Do you want to try soothing her?" Vincent gave a sheepish smile. "I'm not sure she'd listen to me. And just talk to her. Your voice is deep, she'll feel safe." He stepped forward, leaned close. "Hey, little princess. Your dad's not very good at this, but he's learning to be here with you and with your mom." Willa blinked up at him, then stopped crying. Sloan smiled. "See, she knows your voice." It was a tiny moment, but it felt like reclaiming a lost piece of his soul for Vincent. He kissed his daughter's forehead, the first time he'd dared to let his heart open. That night, Sloan took Willa to her own room, but Vincent said quietly, "Could you let her sleep in the living room tonight? I want to stay close." Sloan hesitated, then nodded. He laid a blanket beside the crib and dimmed the light. Willa slept soundly, and Vincent sat there all night, listening to her steady breathing. Outside, Manhattan roared on. Inside, a man was learning to be a father, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. 3 days passed. Sloan hadn't left. Vincent didn't ask, and she didn't explain. Between them lay a strange silence, no longer a wall, but a fragile bridge. They were moving carefully across it, afraid one wrong step could make it crumble. On the 4th morning, Sloan woke early. While she made coffee, she heard a rustle in the living room. Vincent was changing Willa's diaper. His voice was hoarse, tired, but happy. She woke up crying at 3. "I thought you should sleep a little longer." "No." Sloan watched him, her heart softening. The man who once walked away was now crouched down, fumbling with tiny buttons, smiling through exhaustion. It almost broke her. She stepped closer to help, their hands brushing for an instant, just a second, but enough to make them both pause. Vincent smiled. "Did I do it wrong?" "No. You did fine. Just a little clumsy." They both laughed quietly, almost shyly. But that afternoon, while Vincent was buying baby supplies, Sloan noticed his laptop was still open. Emails from the board. Dozens of meetings are waiting. Her chest tightened. She'd seen this before, the way work consumed him, how he vanished into it until days blurred together. And now, fear crept back. Fear that he'd choose that world again and leave this one behind. Vincent returned, holding a small bag of toys. His face lit up. "Look, I got a few things for Willa. She'll love these." Sloan didn't answer. She just looked at him with love and worry tangled together. "You're planning to return to the company, aren't you?" He froze. The joy in his eyes dimmed. "I haven't thought about it." "But you will." "Sloan, I just need to know if you're really here, or if this is just a short visit." Vincent set the bag down and stepped closer. "I don't know how to make you believe me, but I'm trying. I've never stayed home this long. I've never felt enough like this." Sloane's eyes welled up. "I want to believe you, but every time I do, I lose you again." Silence. Willa waved her hands from the crib, breaking the tension. Vincent picked her up, voice soft and steady. "No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere." He said it, but deep inside, he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. That night, they ate together quietly. Only the sound of cutlery and Willa's laughter filled the room. Vincent watched Sloan, the way her face glowed softly in the golden kitchen light as she looked at their daughter. He realized that out of everything he'd ever owned, stocks, homes, cars, fame, nothing had ever felt as peaceful as this moment. He whispered, almost to himself, "If I could go back, I'd never let you leave." Sloan looked up, a sad smile on her lips. "But we can't go back. We can only move forward if you truly want to." Willa's tiny hand reached for his finger, as if to remind him. Vincent closed his hand around hers, and for the first time, he felt ready to let go of everything else, to hold on to this small, precious life. That night, Sloan let Willa sleep in his room. She didn't say why, only murmured, "She sleeps better when you're near." Vincent nodded, but he understood. It was her way of saying, "She's starting to believe again." The room was bathed in soft amber light. Outside, Manhattan shimmered. Inside, a man sat beside a crib, his hand resting gently on his daughter's chest, feeling her heartbeat. From the doorway, Sloan watched her eyes calm, tender, and maybe, just maybe, a little hopeful. Sometimes, to begin again, you don't need grand promises. You need to stay quietly, but honestly. A week after Vincent came home, the penthouse was almost unrecognizable. The cold, metallic gray walls now carried soft shades of lavender. Sloan's choice for the small room next to Vincent's office. "She needs a space of her own," Sloan had said simply when they stood together in the furniture store. Vincent hadn't argued. He only looked around, then nodded quietly. "Choose whatever you like as long as it makes you feel at peace." So the room that had once been filled with data machines and business models turned into a cozy little corner breathing with life. A white crib sat in the center, beside a small wooden shelf lined with stuffed animals, a few framed photos, and soft curtains that swayed gently with the evening air. That first night after the room was finished, Sloan stood by the doorway, holding a cup of ginger tea. The warm light brushed across her face, and Vincent, standing just a few steps away, barely dared to breathe. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "I just wanted a space where she feels safe," Sloan replied. "Not too fancy, not cold." He smiled. "It's warm like you." She hesitated, lowering her gaze to her cup to avoid his eyes. Silence filled the room, broken only by Willa's steady breathing from the crib. After a moment, Sloan spoke, her voice low. "You don't have to do all this to compensate for the past." Vincent looked up. I'm not doing it out of guilt. I'm doing it out of love. Sloan said nothing. The words came too quickly, too surely, and that certainty frightened her. She wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. Every time she'd trusted before, everything had fallen apart. Vincent stepped closer, close enough to feel her presence, but still keeping his distance. You don't have to say anything. Just let me stay. Let me learn how to take care of her with you. Sloan nodded faintly, eyes still fixed on the crib. Willa stirred, her tiny hands waving in the air. Sloan bent down to tuck the blanket around her. Vincent watched her, and the image of her alone in that hospital room, giving birth without him, flashed across his mind. The guilt burned quietly inside his chest. He murmured, almost to himself, I should have been there. Sloane's reply came softly, distant. You couldn't be in two places at once. You made your choice. The room went still again. Vincent wanted to speak, to explain, but realized explanations meant nothing now. The only thing that mattered was what he did next. That night, Willa woke crying. Sloan, exhausted, sat slumped in a chair, still trying to hum softly to soothe her. Vincent came in and gently took the baby from her arms. Sloan started to protest, let me, but stopped. In the dim light, he stood there, holding Willa close against his shoulder, patting her back to a slow rhythm. His voice, low, rough, tender, began to hum, Moon River, the song they'd once played on their first trip to California. Willa quieted, then drifted into sleep on his shoulder. Sloan watched him for a long time, then whispered, You remember that song? I never forgot. I just forgot how to live. The night fell calm. Outside, Manhattan still glittered like its own universe, but inside the lavender room, all three slept in peace for the first time in months. Saturday morning, Sloan made coffee as usual. In pajama pants and a white t-shirt, Vincent held Willa in her pink onesie, clumsy and adorable, laughing every time she wiggled. Sloan sat at the table, chin resting on her hand, quietly watching them. She had never seen Vincent like this, unguarded, genuine, no trace of the billionaire who once commanded boardrooms. Just a father, learning how to make his baby smile. Willa giggled. Vincent looked up, eyes catching Sloan's. This little lady loves an audience, he said warmly. Sloan replied, soft as breath, because she recognizes the person she trusts most. Their eyes met. It lasted only a few seconds, but in that gaze lived closeness and fear. Then the doorbell rang. Vincent placed Willa back in her crib and went to open it. The moment the door swung open, his face changed. Isabel, the woman he'd once worked with, briefly entangled with, back when his marriage was falling apart, stood there. She was still beautiful, elegant, sharp, and the look in her eyes, the same look that once pulled him off course, now made his skin cold. Vincent, Isabel smiled. You're impossible to reach. I've been calling all week. Anzir, what do you need? His voice was stiff. She glanced over his shoulder, her eyes landing on Sloan holding the baby. Oh, I see. So this is why you disappeared from the office. Sloan held Willa tighter, silent. Vincent took a slow breath. Isabel, this isn't the time. I'll call you later. No, you'll listen now, she said, her tone sharp. The board is furious. The Morrison deal's collapsing, and you can't just sit at home playing family while hundreds of millions burn. 1. That phrase, playing family, hung heavy in the air. Vincent's jaw tightened. Isabel, I'll handle it. But not today. When, Vincent? When that baby starts walking. Isabel's smile turned icy. You're losing yourself. The man I knew would never choose feelings over business. You're right, Vincent said quietly. And that man is the reason I lost everything that mattered. He shut the door. The sound echoed through the penthouse, final and sharp. Sloan stared at him, surprised, uncertain. Vincent turned back and walked straight to her. I'm sorry you had to hear that. She shouldn't have come here. Sloan was quiet for a moment, then asked, she was someone from before? He didn't look away. Yes, but it was brief, and it was a mistake. Sloan looked down, pressing her lips together. She wasn't angry, just aching, reminded of the distance between their worlds. Vincent saw it in her eyes. He stepped closer. You have every reason not to trust me. But I need you to know, since I walked out of that office, I haven't considered returning to that life without you and Willa." Sloan looked up. "Are you sure you can handle that? The pressure will come back. They'll knock again, just like today." "Then I'll open the door," he said softly. "But I won't step out. I'll invite them in and then return to you." For the first time in years, Sloan let out a small laugh. "You sound like you've been practicing that in front of a mirror." "Maybe," he smiled. "But this time, I believe it." That evening, after Willa fell asleep, Sloan stepped onto the balcony. Manhattan still shimmered below, but in her chest, another kind of light glowed. Gentle, warm, real. Vincent joined her, draping a coat over her shoulders. "It's cold," he murmured. "Thank you." They stood together in silence. They could see Willa stirring softly in her crib through the glass doors. Sloan smiled faintly. "She's sleeping peacefully." Vincent's voice was almost a whisper, "because she knows her parents are both here." Sloan turned to him, and in the soft amber glow, she saw something she hadn't dared believe in for years. Vincent had truly changed. Not through promises, but through small, quiet acts, each honest and real. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time since the day he walked away, she let herself believe that maybe two people who once lost each other could truly find their way home again. Manhattan never truly sleeps. But since Willa was born, Sloan had learned to filter out the city's noise, sirens, engines, distant laughter, until only one sound remained: her daughter's steady breathing. Tonight, the apartment glowed under the soft amber of a nightlight, a faint breeze slipping through the white curtains. After a long day, Vincent fell asleep on the couch cleaning, laundry, assembling Willa's new crib. Sloan thought she was too tired to stay awake, but sleep wouldn't come. Maybe it was because of what happened earlier: Isabel, the company, the ghosts of their past. She knew Vincent was trying, but fear still crept through her like a shadow that refused to fade. She was afraid that one day, when the phone rang, he'd turn away again. Willa's gentle breathing calmed her. The baby lay peacefully, tiny hands resting over her chest as if cradling her dream. Sloan leaned down to kiss her forehead, then quietly slipped to the balcony. Below her, the city stretched like an upside-down sky, a sea of lights shimmering through a thin veil of mist. She pulled a light sweater around her shoulders, staring at the maze of glowing streets. She once loved this city and believed Manhattan was where every dream began. But now, it only reminded her of the nights she'd walked alone through the rain, her belly heavy with life, her heart heavier still. A sound behind her, the soft creak of a door. Vincent stepped out, hair tousled, voice rough with sleep. "You can't sleep." "No," she murmured. "Just needed some air." He came to stand beside her. They both looked at the city, its lights fading into the fog. After a long silence, Sloan spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Vincent, what if something happens tomorrow? What if you choose to work again?" He looked at her long, steady. "I don't know what the future will bring, but tonight, I know I want to be here." "I used to believe your promises," she whispered. "The last time, you said you'd come home early, but you never did." Vincent took a deep breath, his voice low, almost confessional. "Back then, I was afraid. Afraid that if I came home, I'd have to face myself. In business, I always knew who I was, what I was good at. But in marriage, I was lost." "You were lost because you didn't love enough." "No," he said softly, "because I loved too much and didn't know how to keep it." Sloan turned away, tears sliding down her face before she even noticed. She'd heard apologies before, explanations, excuses, but his voice carried none of that this time. This was a confession, bare, human, trembling. He took a step closer, gently touching her hand. "Sloan, if you'll let me, I want to start over. I don't need forgiveness, just the chance to stay and learn how to love you right." Her eyes met his, glistening. "You'll never know how much I loved you, Vincent. I loved you with everything I had left, and when you left, I had to learn how to breathe without shattering. I'm terrified that if I trust you again, it'll kill me." Low. Her voice broke, and tears came freely. Vincent didn't speak. He only stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her. Sloan tensed for a second, then let herself fall into the warmth. He didn't say, "Don't cry." He didn't say, "It'll be okay." He held her steady, quiet enough for her to know he was truly there. After a while, Sloan whispered, her voice raw, "Do you know what I used to pray for? Every night, I prayed that Willa would look like you, but never have your heart." Vincent closed his eyes. The words cut clean through him. He didn't defend himself. He only said, quietly, "Thank you for still letting me stand here." The wind brushed past them, carrying the hum of the sleepless city. And there they stood, two people who had once broken each other, held together again, not by promises or forgiveness, but by the quiet truth that they still loved, even if neither dared to say it aloud. When Sloan woke, morning light poured through the curtains. She startled for a moment, realizing her head was resting on Vincent's shoulder, a thin blanket draped over them. He was still asleep, peaceful in a way she hadn't seen in years. He didn't look like a man carrying the world's weight for the first time in months, just someone learning how to love again. Sloan stood, made coffee, and let its warmth fill the kitchen. Vincent stirred awake, smiling faintly. "Good morning." "Good morning," she replied softly, setting a cup on the table. "Did you sleep well?" "For the first time, I didn't dream at all." Sloan smiled quietly. She sat across from him, idly turning the old ring on her finger, their wedding ring. She'd never taken it off, even after the divorce. Vincent noticed, his gaze softening. "You kept it?" "I tried to throw it away once. But every time I looked at it, I thought, if I let it go, the past would disappear completely. And I wasn't ready for that." He said gently, "Then don't throw it away. Let me bring it back into the present." The air between them stilled. Sloan looked down, then stood. "Can you do something for me? Anything. Keep your promise. Stay. Not just today." Vincent nodded. "I'll stay. Not because I promised, but because this is where I belong." A soft cry came from the nursery. Sloan smiled and went to the crib. Vincent followed, helping her change Willa's diaper and feeding her. They both sat quietly, watching her sleep. Morning light spilled through the window, painting Willa's cheeks warmly. "She looks so much like you," Sloan murmured. Vincent chuckled. "I just hope she doesn't turn out too much like me. I don't want her to learn how to fix her mistakes the way I did." "Maybe that's exactly why she'll be different," Sloan replied. That afternoon, Vincent called his younger brother, Cameron, in Seattle. They talked for 2 hours. Cameron said, "You don't need to be perfect, Vince. Just be there. That's something Dad never managed to do for us." Vincent went quiet, glancing toward the living room where Sloan played with Willa. His voice softened. "Maybe it's time I stop trying to be a CEO and start learning to be a father, a husband." Cameron laughed. "Now you're talking. You'll see love's a lot simpler than investment portfolios." Later that day, Vincent and Sloan took Willa for a walk in Central Park. Spring was kind, the air cool, the trees brushed with new green, sunlight filtering like honey through the branches. Willa slept soundly in her stroller, while Sloan walked beside Vincent, brushing her hair back from the wind. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Every step felt like learning how to walk together again. Vincent finally said, quietly, "I used to hate silence. But now, I want to keep it because even silence feels full with you." Sloan smiled, her eyes soft. As the sun set, Sloan lifted Willa into her arms and leaned against Vincent's shoulder. "Maybe I haven't forgiven you yet," she whispered. Vincent answered, "I don't need forgiveness. I need you to believe I'm not leaving again." She looked up at him, and in the warm glow of the Central Park sunset, they stood there, eyes locked. No promises, no grand words, just something small but enduring, a fragile trust, growing quietly between two hearts once broken. Sloan tucked Willa into her crib, while Vincent lingered at the doorway that night. He watched them and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, I'll start over, one step at a time." Outside, Manhattan gleamed with its endless lights. But high above the city, in that quiet penthouse, dawn had already come early. In the simple act of two people choosing, silently, to stay, that morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, spilling into the kitchen where Sloan stood rinsing a baby bottle. The sound of running water, the soft clink of glass, and Willa's giggles from her crib blended into the sweetest melody Vincent had ever heard. He leaned against the doorway, shirt unbuttoned, hair tousled, watching her. The woman who had once walked out of his life was now standing there again, calm and graceful, as if heartbreak had never existed. Sloan turned, catching his gaze, and raised an eyebrow. "What are you looking at?" Vincent smiled, his voice low and warm. "Just trying to memorize this. The kitchen, the light, and you." She shook her head, smiling softly. "You talk like you won't get another chance to see it." He half smiled, half sighed. "Who knows what tomorrow brings? I don't want to miss today." How he said it slow, honest, fully present stirred her heart, not because of his words, but because, for once, he truly meant them. Willa squirmed and laughed as Vincent leaned over, gently tapping her nose. "Good morning, little princess. You're all smiles today, huh?" The baby squealed and reached for him. Sloan watched, her lips curving upward. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment, yet it was everything she had once wished for. Vincent fumbled with the coffee machine, determined. This time, he managed better than before. He carefully set a mug before Sloan, as if offering something precious. "No latte, no foam art, just plain coffee. But I made it for you." Sloan took a sip, nodded. "A little bitter, but it smells good. Just like you." Vincent laughed. "If I'm coffee, then you're the sugar. Mix us no bitterness left." They both laughed, their voices light as the morning breeze. After breakfast, Vincent suggested they walk in the small park nearby. Sloan hesitated, then agreed. It was the first time they'd gone out together as a family since the divorce. May sunlight was kind that day, soft air, clean skies. Willa slept peacefully in her stroller as they walked side by side. Vincent looked around, then said quietly, "I used to think happiness meant something big, running a company, closing billion-dollar deals. But maybe it's just this. Watching the two people I love walk in the Sunday." Sloan smiled faintly. "You talk like you've already let everything go." "Not yet, but I'm learning what truly matters." They stopped by the lake, where ducks drifted lazily across the rippling water. Sloan sat on a wooden bench, her eyes following the sunlight on the surface. Vincent sat beside her, quiet for a long time before speaking. "I wanted to say this yesterday, but I was afraid you'd think it was just another promise. Say it anyway. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I need you to know I choose to stay, not out of duty, not just for her, but because I can't lose you again." Sloan looked at him. The sunlight reflected in his brown eyes, steady and sincere, and she had to look away. "You know, I waited a year to hear you say that, but now that you have, I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of believing." Vincent reached for her hand gently, not to hold, but to let her feel his warmth. "Then be scared, but don't walk away." Something inside her broke open. She blinked back tears, realizing how much softer he'd become, no longer the proud, distant man she once married, but someone simply trying to hold on to what was real. When they got home, Sloan put Willa in her crib while Vincent washed the dishes. She leaned against the counter, amused. The billionaire who once had a whole staff now stood there with a towel in hand, humming quietly to himself. He turned, smiling. "I know what you're thinking, but I like this, doing small things I used to call meaningless. Turns out happiness sometimes comes from washing dishes," she teased. He chuckled. "No, from knowing someone's waiting while you finish." They both laughed, their voices mingling with the sound of running water and the hum of the dishwasher, a melody of ordinary, beautiful life. That night, Sloan stood on the balcony while Vincent played with Willa. The baby started to recognize him now. She giggled every time he leaned close. Through the glass, Sloan watched them, and for the first time she thought, maybe he really has changed. The next morning, Vincent woke early. The air was cool, pale light filtering through the curtains. He tiptoed into the kitchen, brewed coffee, and toasted bread, creeping not to wake them. When Sloan finally stirred, she smelled fresh bread and coffee. The table was set. Vincent stood slicing fruit, sleeves rolled up, sunlight brushing his shoulders. She paused in the doorway, smiling. "What are you doing?" Making breakfast for the two people I love. Do you even know what you're doing? No. But I'm counting on you to save me if I ruin it. Then you guessed right. They both laughed. The simplicity of it warmed her more than any grand gesture ever could. After breakfast, they took Willa to the little park below their building. Children's laughter floated in the air, and sunlight danced in Sloane's golden hair. A faint scent of lavender drifted from the flower shop on the corner. Vincent stopped, turned to her, his voice steady and low. Can I ask you something? What is it? If I asked for another chance not to go back, but to start again, would you give it to me? Sloane looked at him, her expression caught between surprise and tenderness. I can't promise anything, but I can let you stay to prove it. Vincent smiled, and the sunlight caught his eyes like a reflection from within. That's enough. I don't need anything else. They walked silently, Willa sleeping soundly, her tiny hand curled in a fist. After a while, Sloane said quietly, I'm just afraid you'll disappear again one day. Vincent's reply came gently but firm. Not this time. If I lose anything now, I'd rather lose it all, just not you. While Sloane put Willa down for her nap that afternoon, Vincent sat in the living room with his laptop, but instead of checking work emails, he opened a new document, his resignation letter. He wrote slowly, line by line, without hesitation. When he finally hit send, he felt something lift from his chest. He stood, looking around the apartment, no longer a billionaire's penthouse, but a home being reborn. Sloane stepped out and saw him standing still. What is it? I just quit. She froze. You did? Because of me? Because of me. Because for once, I want to live honestly. She didn't speak, just walked over and touched his hand. I don't even know what to say. Vincent smiled softly. Just say, stay, and I won't go. Her lips trembled into a smile, tears shining. Stay, Vincent. He pulled her into his arms. No promises, no rings, no ceremonies, only the golden light pouring through the windows, wrapping them in its quiet warmth, and an unspoken vow that he would stay for good this time. Willa woke, whimpering softly. Sloane went to pick her up, Vincent following close behind. The three stood by the window, watching the sunset fall over Manhattan. Sloane whispered, You know, this light is beautiful. Vincent squeezed her hand gently. Because it's the light after the storm. She looked up at him, smiling through her tears. And because this time, you stayed. In the following days, life in Vincent and Sloane's apartment moved with a quiet rhythm, soft and steady, like a gentle piece of music. Every morning, Vincent woke early, made coffee, and prepared Willa's milk. Sloane would appear moments later, her hair loosely tied, her sleep shirt wrinkled, but her eyes shining with that familiar, tender light. Willa had begun to recognize her father. Every time Vincent leaned down, she laughed that tiny, pure laugh that made him feel richer than any balance sheet he had ever read. Only Cameron knew about Vincent's resignation. The press had started speculating, Vincent DeVaro disappears from Manhattan's financial world. Ugh. The mystery behind the young billionaire's retreat. Vincent ignored them all. You're not afraid of what they'll say? Sloane asked one morning. He shrugged. I used to be, but then I realized none of those people live my life. Sloane looked at him for a long time. For the first time, she truly believed he'd let go of the shadow that once ruled him. But the past, even when asleep, always finds a way to wake. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Sloane was rocking Willa to sleep, so Vincent went to open it. Standing there was Isabel. Gone was her usual polished confidence. She wore a plain black dress, her hair tied back, her eyes tired. Vincent, she said softly, I need to talk to you. He hesitated, then stepped aside, letting her in. The air between them felt heavy. Isabel glanced around the room, baby bottles, toys, a stroller, signs of a life she didn't belong to. So the rumors were true, she said faintly. You really do have a family now. Vincent closed the door behind them. What are you doing here, Isabel? She sighed. The company's in chaos. The board needs you. There are papers left unsigned, projects unfinished, and... She paused, lowering her voice. And the investigation isn't entirely over. I'm afraid they might drag you back into it. Vincent frowned. I walked away. Everything tied to me was settled. Not completely, she said, shaking her head. Some transactions still carry your name. If the Financial Commission reopens the case, they might think you're hiding something. She met his eyes, her voice softening. I know I made mistakes, Vincent. I did things that cost you everything. But if I hadn't come here, you might be paying for them again. Vincent studied her, the woman who had once stood beside him through countless deals, who had been both ally and betrayer. Now she stood small, weary, a person stripped of power, searching for a way to make amends. Just then, Sloan appeared in the doorway, holding Willa. She froze briefly when she saw Isabel. Their eyes met, and in that instant, words were unnecessary. Sloan already understood. Vincent said quietly, "Sloan, this is Isabel. She came about company matters." Sloan nodded politely. "Hello. Would you like some water?" Isabel shook her head quickly. "No, thank you. I won't stay long." Silence lingered. Willa gripped her mother's finger and turned her face away from the stranger. Isabel's gaze softened. "She's beautiful. Looks a lot like you, Vincent." He said nothing. Sloan smiled faintly, thanked her, and disappeared into the nursery. When the door closed, Isabel exhaled. "So, she's why you gave it all up?" Vincent looked at her calmly. "No, she's the reason I remembered who I am." Isabel smiled sadly. "You really have changed. You never used to talk like that." "I used to be afraid of feelings," he replied. "Now I know if you can't live honestly, there's nothing worth keeping." She set a folder on the table. "These are copies of the old files. You might need them someday. And Vincent, I'm sorry. For everything." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I forgive you for what you did, and for what I let happen." When Isabel left, Sloan emerged again, her expression thoughtful rather than wary. "She came to apologize." "Yes," he said, "and to remind me that the past doesn't disappear, it just loses its sharp edges." Sloan stepped closer. "Do you ever regret it? All of it?" "I do," Vincent admitted, "but I don't want it back. I only want to live fully now." She rested her head on his shoulder. Willa slept in her arms. In the soft glow of late afternoon, the three stood quietly together. Outside, the light tilted golden, as if even their mistakes were being forgiven by the Sunday. That night, Sloan couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the hum of the city, the steady rhythm of Willa's breathing. She knew Isabel's visit was only about business, but something inside her ached, not jealousy, but fear. Fear that Vincent might get pulled back into that old, glittering world of money, meetings, applause. And what could she offer in comparison? Just a kitchen, a child, and a love that spoke softly. Would that be enough? Vincent stirred, sensing her wakefulness. "You can't sleep?" "No, just thinking about today." He was quiet for a moment, then said gently, "I know you're afraid, but I'm done with that world, Sloan. I don't want to be that man anymore." "You say that now, but what if they call? What if another crisis comes? Then I'll still be here." She turned toward him and saw in his eyes no hesitation, no doubt. Vincent reached out, taking her hand. "You know what's funny? I used to think strength meant control, managing everything, never faltering. But now I think strength is about letting go, about loving without guarantees." Sloan smiled faintly. "So you're letting go, huh?" "Everything," he said softly. "Except you and her." Tears welled in her eyes. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady, sure, and felt peace settle over her like a blanket. The next morning, Vincent's phone buzzed. It was Cameron. "Good news, Vince," his brother said, voice bright. "Mr. Yamamoto reached out. He wants to buy your renewable energy patents, and the offer's big, really big." Vincent laughed in disbelief. "I thought those got buried under piles of old paperwork. You still hold personal rights. If you sell, you could restart anything or do nothing." Vincent looked at Sloan, sitting on the floor, playing with Willa. The sight made him smile. "I think I know what I want to do." Cameron chuckled. "Don't tell me you'll pour it into some charity again." "Not charity," Vincent said. "A scholarship fund. For single mothers. For women like Sloan once was." Cameron was silent for a beat, then his voice softened. You really are a different man now, big brother. When the call ended, Vincent walked over to Sloan. She looked up, curious. What's going on? Good news, he said, smiling. And an idea, but only if you agree. What kind of idea? I want to start a foundation for single mothers, named after our daughter, the Willa Fund. Sloane's eyes widened, then filled with tears. You really want to do that? I've seen what strength looks like in you. I want to give others the same chance you never had. Ember. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. Vincent, I think I'm falling in love with you all over again. He smiled, his breath warm against her ear. Good, because I never stopped loving you. That afternoon, sunlight poured through the windows, catching Willa's laughter in its golden threads. And in that light, warm, forgiving, alive, Sloan understood. The past may knock again, but it can't stay. When two people have truly learned how to love. 3 months later, autumn arrived early. The trees along Park Avenue were already brushed with gold, the air carried a crisp chill, and the cafes on every corner filled the streets with the scent of cinnamon and warm pastries. Life for Vincent and Sloan had found a rhythm quiet, unpretentious, and complete in its simplicity. Vincent devoted his days to the Willa Foundation, an idea that had begun modestly but grew beyond his expectations. Stories about the billionaire who walked away from power to help single mothers spread quickly across social media. When a major newspaper ran a headline, "The billionaire who chose love over power," Vincent only smiled. He neither denied nor confirmed it. He told Sloan, if that story makes even one person believe that love is worth the risk, then it's done something good. Sloan had started working part-time at a small design studio in Brooklyn. She sketched simple, human moments, a hand holding another, a mother's gaze toward her child, the grateful eyes of those whose lives the foundation had touched. When Vincent sat beside her, watching her draw, he realized that within each line of her art lived something he had spent years searching for truth. But peace, as they both knew, is always fragile. One evening, Vincent's phone rang. It was Marcus, his old friend and former CFO. His voice was urgent. Vincent, Isabel's been arrested, and they're reopening all the old files, including your investments. Vincent was silent for a long moment. Do they have evidence? Not yet. But the lawyers say you might be called in for questioning. You should prepare. When the call ended, Vincent sat quietly at the table. From the kitchen came the sound of Sloan chopping vegetables, the hiss of olive oil, and the scent of garlic and thyme. Ordinary life, precious and vulnerable. She turned, sensing his stillness. What's wrong? He didn't want to hide it. He told her everything, his tone steady, calm. When he finished, Sloan stood silently momentarily, walked over, and placed her hand on his shoulder. We've survived worse than this, haven't we? But this time, I'm not the only one it could hurt. She smiled gently, eyes unwavering. You're forgetting something, Vincent. We're not just you and me anymore. We're us. The words caught in his throat. He pulled her close, speechless, only the sound of their daughter's laughter in the next room breaking the heaviness around them. The next day, Vincent met with his lawyers. Sloan insisted on coming, even though he told her she didn't have to. The meeting room on the 22nd floor overlooked Central Park, glass walls, tailored suits, the sterile scent of cologne, and polished floors. As Vincent stepped inside, he felt like a ghost revisiting a world he'd once ruled and now could barely recognize. The lawyers explained, Isabel had manipulated stock transactions, using Vincent's authorization to validate them. Though he hadn't been involved, his name was still attached. He would have to appear before the commission to clear his record. When they left the building, Sloan squeezed his hand tightly. It'll be all right, Vincent. He nodded, smiled faintly, but the weight inside him didn't ease. That night, they sat together on the couch after Willa fell asleep. Only the warm glow of a lamp and the distant hum of the city filled the quiet. Sloan asked softly, if everything came crashing back the pressure, would you regret walking away? Vincent turned to her, his voice slow and even. No, I only regret how many years it took me to see this. Money can repurchase your reputation, but it can't buy one peaceful dinner with you and our daughter. Sloan smiled through tears. He brushed one away and whispered, "Every choice comes with a price. But this time, I chose right." 2 weeks later, Vincent appeared before the investigation board. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like a storm. He wore a simple suit, no bodyguards, no entourage, just Sloan and Cameron walking beside him. Sloan held his hand at the door, looking straight into his eyes. "Whatever happens in there, remember why you're standing here." He nodded, took a deep breath, and walked in. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Vincent answered each question clearly, calmly, no evasion, no fear. When asked if he regretted ever trusting Isabel, he said, "I regret not realizing sooner that trust is its own form of investment, and investing in the wrong person can cost you everything. But if those losses taught me to love honestly, I wouldn't trade them for anything." The room fell silent. Even the board members looked at him with quiet respect. When he stepped outside, Sloan was waiting. The wind lifted a strand of her hair. She smiled, and in that smile, he knew he had already won. The next day's headline read, "Vincent Devereaux cleared of all allegations." But what moved him most wasn't the vindication, it was a single line buried at the end of the article. He left the building hand in hand with his wife, smiling softly, like a man who had finally laid down the heaviest armor of his life. In the months that followed, the Willer Foundation flourished. Dozens of single mothers received training, jobs, and a chance to rebuild their lives. Sloan painted their faces, women who had rediscovered hope, and hung the portraits on the living room wall, each one a small resurrection. One winter evening, as Willa took her first uncertain steps, Vincent stood on the back porch, watching the Christmas lights shimmer on fresh snow. Sloan came out beside him, wrapping a coat tighter around her shoulders. "Do you remember our first winter here?" "Of course. You were freezing, and I couldn't even light the fireplace. Now you can do just about everything." Vincent smiled, took her hand. "No. Now I know better ways to keep you warm." "Like what?" He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. "Love." They stood silently as snowflakes drifted down, and Willa's laughter echoed from inside, mingling with the scent of baked bread and cinnamon. Vincent whispered, "Do you ever think, all the choices we were once afraid of, the leaving, the losing, the starting over, maybe they were always leading us right here?" Sloan rested her head on his shoulder and answered softly, "Because every choice, when made with love, becomes fate." And in that quiet, glowing moment, they both knew the road ahead would still bring challenges, but nothing could divide them again, because this time they no longer had to choose between love and life. They had finally learned how to live inside love. A year after Vincent left the world of finance, they moved to Westchester, a quiet little town just over an hour from Manhattan. The house they bought sat at the end of an oak-lined street, with a sun-drenched porch, a pale blue door, and a small backyard where Willa could run free. Sloan called it the House of Sunlight, and because no matter the day or season, light always found its way through every window, filling every corner with warmth and peace, the very breath of the life they had learned to reclaim. In the mornings, Sloan brewed coffee and painted by the window, while Vincent tended to the lavender shrubs he'd planted. Now steady on her little feet, Willa toddled across the dew-covered grass, her laughter ringing through the garden like birdsong. Vincent once thought he wasn't built for a slow life like this. But each morning, as he heard his daughter's laughter and Sloane's humming in the kitchen, he felt a calm he never knew he'd needed. He had everything now, not by conquering, but by stopping. One noon, Sloan brought a plate of warm apple pie to the wooden table on the porch. Vincent held Willa on his lap as she clumsily scooped her first bite. Sloan laughed, brushed flour off their daughter's cheek, then looked up. "See, the world can be as noisy as it wants out there, but here, there's just us." Vincent nodded, his gaze soft. "I used to think loving someone meant protecting them from the world. Now I know it means creating a small world peaceful enough for them to smile." Sloan looked at him, her eyes reflecting a quiet trust she once thought she'd lost forever. "I never thought you'd survive in a quiet place." "Neither did I," he smiled. "But it turns out, silence was the sound my heart had been waiting for." As the afternoon light fell across the porch, Vincent stretched out on the wicker chair with a book. Sloan sketched beside him, and Willa slept in her small hammock. Vincent could have pointed towards Sloan and Willa if someone had asked him, "What is happiness?" Sometimes the neighbors stopped by the elderly couple next door, a young teacher, a few kids Willa's age. They all knew he'd once been a billionaire, but titles didn't matter here. People knew him as Vincent, the man who grows lavender best on the block, and Sloan, the painter whose smile feels like sunlight. At the town summer fair, Sloan displayed her paintings while Vincent brought bundles of fresh lavender. She sold a few pieces. He gave away all his flowers to the children in the neighborhood. On the walk home, Sloan teased him, "You really are hopeless at business." End quote. "I wasn't trying to sell anything," he laughed. "I just wanted everyone passed by to smile like you do." She smiled back, softly. "Then you're doing a perfect job." The evening light shimmered in his eyes, warm as sunlight melting into skin. He said quietly, "If there's a next life, I hope I meet you again, somewhere with sunlight like this." Sloan didn't answer. She just reached for his hand and squeezed. Some words don't need a reply, the heart understands them long before they're spoken. That May, the Willa Foundation turned 1 year old. Sloan redesigned its logo, 3 hands joined together, simple yet full of meaning. Vincent told her, "I want to hang it in the living room, so when people ask what I do, I can point to that." They held a small celebration in their backyard, a handful of team members, mothers the foundation had helped, and a few close friends. Sunlight spilled across the lawn, soft acoustic music floated in the air, and Willa ran around clutching a purple balloon, her golden hair messy and bright. In the middle of the gathering, a young woman approached Sloan, her voice trembling. "Miss Sloan, thank you. You and Mr. Vincent, if it weren't for the foundation, I don't know where I'd be." Sloan smiled and took her hands. "No, you saved yourself. We just reminded you that you could." Summoned 4. Vincent watched from a distance, his heart full of quiet pride. He thought of those sleepless early months, the doubts, the long calls, the heavy choices, and realized they had all been stepping stones toward the only thing that mattered now, a meaningful life. When the party ended and the sun dipped behind the hill, Sloan tidied up while Vincent carried Willa to bed. He laid her in the crib and watched her for a while, her small hand clutching a worn teddy bear. He whispered, "You know, Willa, I used to think success meant standing on top of the world. But now I know it's this, watching you grow up believing that love is the one thing worth trusting." Sloan stepped in, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Who are you talking to?" "The little girl who taught me how to be a father." "And who taught you how to be a good man?" Vincent turned and kissed her forehead. "The woman standing right here." "I will." She laughed softly and rested her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I still get scared that this happiness could be fragile." He smiled. "Happiness is fragile, but that doesn't make it less real. Every day we choose to keep it, it grows stronger." They stood together, gazing out at the garden bathed in the gentle glow of porch lights. Willa stirred once, then settled back into sleep. Outside, the night was still, only crickets singing and the faint scent of lavender drifting through the air. Vincent whispered, "The day you left me, I thought my world had ended. Now I know you taught me how to rebuild it, with my hands and heart." Sloan smiled, squeezing his hand. "And you taught me that love isn't about holding on. It's about choosing to stay again and again." The breeze rustled softly through the trees, carrying their daughter's laughter from inside. Under that sun-washed roof, 2 people who had once lost each other now stood side by side, needing no promises, only presence in a perfect, ordinary moment of peace. At the end of the quiet street, the little house that sunlight always found had become proof of something accurate and straightforward. Sometimes, to have everything, you only need to choose to love again. One more time. Phần 10. Ánh sáng cuối cùng. 3 năm trôi qua kể từ ngày Sloan trở về từ triển lãm thứ 2. Họ vẫn ở trong ngôi nhà có nắng nơi hàng lavender nở rộ mỗi mùa hè. Willa giờ đã 5 tuổi, thông minh, lanh lợi và đầy tính tò mò như mẹ. Mỗi sáng, cô bé chạy ra vườn cùng Vincent, nhặt những bông lavender rụng, rồi nghiêm túc hỏi, "Ba ơi, Hoa có ngủ không?" Vincent cười, cúi xuống hôn mái tóc con gái. "Có chứ, khi con ngủ, Hoa cũng nhắm mắt." Sloan ngồi bên cửa sổ, vẽ lại cảnh ấy, người đàn ông và đứa bé giữa khu vườn tràn nắng. Cô biết, nếu có điều gì gọi là đủ đầy, thì cô đang sống trong nó. Vincent đã trở thành giảng viên khách mời tại một trường đại học nhỏ, dạy môn đạo đức trong kinh doanh. Sinh viên thích anh vì cách nói chuyện giản dị, không dùng ngôn ngữ học thuật mà kể lại chính những sai lầm, mất mát và bài học anh từng trải qua. Một sinh viên hỏi, thưa thầy, nếu được quay lại, thầy có thay đổi lựa chọn năm ấy không? Vincent mỉm cười, không, vì nếu tôi không mất tất cả, tôi sẽ chẳng bao giờ học được thế nào là có tất cả. Mỗi khi kết thúc buổi giảng, anh lại lái xe về nhà, qua những con đường rợp bóng cây, lòng bình yên lạ thường. Ở cổng, Willa luôn đợi anh với tiếng gọi trong veo. Ba ơi, con vẽ xong rồi. Và Sloan, trong chiếc váy vải mềm, nở nụ cười khiến anh quên hết mỏi mệt. Một tối đầu thu, cả ba ngồi bên hiên, ngắm bầu trời đầy sao. Willa hỏi, ba ơi, khi con lớn, con có thể trở thành họa sĩ như mẹ không? Nếu đó là điều con yêu, thì dĩ nhiên rồi. Còn nếu con muốn làm người như ba, Vincent ai am lặng một chút, rồi mỉm cười, thì hãy là người tốt hơn ba. Sloan quay sang nhìn anh, mắt cô long lanh trong ánh trăng. Anh biết không, có những câu nói của anh, Willa sẽ nhớ cả đời. Anh khẽ đáp, anh chỉ mong con nhớ rằng yêu thương là điều không bao giờ lỗi thời. Wow! Gió thu thổi qua, đưa hương lavender và tiếng cười của con gái lan xa trong đêm. Ở khoảnh khắc đó, Vincent biết mình đã đi hết một vòng lớn của đời người, để trở lại nơi đáng lẽ anh phải ở ngay từ đầu. Vài tháng sau, Sloan nhận tin vui, cô mang thai lần 2. Vincent nghe tin khi đang ở lớp, giữa giờ giảng. Anh đứng sững, cười không nói nên lời. Tối ấy, anh ôm cô thật lâu, nói nhỏ bên tai, em lại làm anh sợ mất bình tĩnh giữa chỗ đông người rồi. Ô lẩu. Sloan cười khẽ. Anh từng nói, sợ không phải là yếu, mà là vì điều mình sợ mất quá quý giá. Và anh sẽ sợ suốt đời, nếu điều đó có nghĩa là được yêu em. Thai kỳ lần này khó hơn trước. Sloan mệt nhiều, phải nằm nghỉ phần lớn thời gian. Vincent gác lại phần lớn công việc để ở bên cô. Anh học nấu ăn, học thay tã, học du con ngủ để Sloan nghỉ ngơi. Có đêm, Sloan tỉnh giấc, thấy Vincent đang ngồi đọc sách dưới ánh đèn vàng, tay vẫn nắm tay cô. Anh ngẩng lên, cười. Anh không ngủ được khi em thở nặng nhọc thế này. Anh không cần phải lo từng chút vậy đâu. Không lo thì anh biết làm gì khác. Em là toàn bộ thế giới của anh rồi. Cô nhìn anh, lòng dâng tràn thứ cảm xúc vừa yêu vừa biết ơn. Người đàn ông từng bỏ cả thế giới để tìm lại chính mình. Giờ chỉ cần nghe tiếng tim hai mẹ con đập là thấy đủ. Tháng Giêng năm sau, trong một buổi sáng phủ đầy tuyết, đứa con thứ 2 của họ chào đời. Là bé trai da hồng, tóc đen như Sloan, đôi mắt xám như Vincent. Họ đặt tên con là Hope James DeVero để nhắc nhớ cả hai điều đã đưa họ về bên nhau, hy vọng và gia đình. Willa được bế em lần đầu, thì thầm với giọng ngọng nghịu, em bé thơm như bánh. Vincent bật cười, hôn nhẹ lên tóc con gái, vì em sinh ra từ tình yêu của mẹ và ba mà. Những ngày đầu làm cha hai con, Vincent bận rộn hơn bao giờ hết, nhưng anh chưa từng thấy mệt mỏi. Mỗi lần ẵm Hope trong tay, anh thấy rõ hơn cả. Hạnh phúc không nằm ở việc mình có bao nhiêu, mà ở việc mình được trao bao nhiêu để yêu. Sloan hồi phục chậm, nhưng tinh thần rạng rỡ. Một buổi sáng, khi tuyết ngoài sân vừa tan, cô mở mắt, thấy Vincent đang đứng bên cửa sổ, bế Hope, ngắm nắng chiếu vào căn phòng. Ánh sáng vàng lấp lánh trên vai anh. Cô chợt nghĩ chưa bao giờ cô thấy anh yên như thế. Không còn bóng của người đàn ông từng chạy theo thành công, chỉ còn người đàn ông đang học cách lắng nghe từng nhịp thở nhỏ trong vòng tay mình. Cô khẽ nói, anh có biết không, ngày xưa em từng mơ được nhìn thấy anh như thế này. Vincent quay lại, cười, và anh từng mơ được em tha thứ như thế này. Cả hai cùng cười, nước mắt lăn dài nhưng không buồn. Đó là nước mắt của người đã đi qua giông bão và nhận ra bình yên là món quà hiếm nhất. 5 năm sau, khi Hope tròn 5 tuổi, Willa 10, Sloan tổ chức triển lãm lớn nhất đời cô, The Light We Keep, ánh sáng ta giữ lại. Buổi khai mạc ở một gallery ngay trung tâm thành phố, đông kín người. Bức tranh trung tâm là cảnh ngôi nhà của họ dưới ánh chiều, cửa mở toang, hai đứa trẻ chạy chơi, còn Vincent và Sloan ngồi dưới hiên. Bên dưới ghi một dòng nhỏ, dành tặng người đã dạy tôi rằng ánh sáng không đến từ mặt trời, mà từ những người biết ở lại. Land. Khi đèn trong phòng dịu xuống, Vincent bước đến bên cô. Anh không nói gì, chỉ khẽ cầm tay Sloan. Cô nhìn quanh bạn bè, khách xem, tiếng vỗ tay, nhưng trong lòng chỉ nghe thấy nhịp tim của người đàn ông bên cạnh. Anh nghiêng xuống nói nhỏ, em biết không, anh từng sợ mình không đủ giỏi để giữ em. Giờ anh chỉ biết cảm ơn vì em chưa từng buông tay. Sloan cười. Giữ nhau đâu cần giỏi, chỉ cần thật. Buổi tối, khi cả nhà trở về, Willa ngủ gục trên xe, Hope tựa đầu vào vai mẹ. Vincent lái chậm qua con đường đầy lá rụng. Đèn vàng chạy xuống mặt đường như những mảnh ký ức trôi ngang. Sloan nhìn ra ngoài cửa kính, khẽ nói. 10 năm trước, em chưa bao giờ nghĩ mình sẽ có kết thúc này. Vincent đáp, giọng nhẹ như gió. Anh cũng không, nhưng đôi khi, Chúa viết lại câu chuyện bằng chính những mảnh vỡ của ta. Xe dừng trước ngôi nhà có nắng. Vincent bê Hope, Sloan ẵm Willa. Cả hai cùng bước qua cánh cửa gỗ đã cũ. Trong bóng tối, ánh đèn nhỏ trong phòng khách tự động bật lên thứ ánh sáng dịu dàng, vàng ấm, bao quanh họ như vòng tay. Vincent quay sang, khẽ nói. Em biết không, đây chính là ánh sáng cuối cùng mà anh cần. Sloan đặt đầu lên vai anh, thì thầm. Không Vincent, đây không phải ánh sáng cuối cùng. Đây là nơi mọi ánh sáng bắt đầu. Cô hôn anh, nhẹ như gió, như cảm ơn, như lời hứa không bao giờ cần nói lại. Bên trong, hai đứa trẻ cười trong mơ. Ngoài hiên lavender vẫn nở tím, thơm và bền bỉ như tình yêu của cha mẹ chúng. Và trong ngôi nhà có nắng ấy, giữa đêm tĩnh lặng, ánh sáng vẫn cháy, không vì lửa, mà vì những con người đã học được cách ở lại. Và đó là toàn bộ hành trình của Vincent Devereaux, người từng có tất cả, mất tất cả, rồi tìm lại chính mình trong vòng tay người phụ nữ mà anh yêu hơn cả cuộc đời. Từ những căn phòng lạnh lẽo giữa Manhattan, cho đến ngôi nhà nhỏ rợp nắng ở ngoại ô, anh đã học được rằng, đôi khi, thành công không nằm ở việc đứng trên đỉnh cao, mà ở việc dám ngồi xuống, bên cạnh người mình thương, và nói, anh ở lại. Nếu bạn đã nghe đến đây, cảm ơn vì đã dành thời gian cho một câu chuyện về tình yêu, sự tha thứ và ánh sáng của lòng người. Bạn hãy để lại cảm xúc của mình bên dưới nhé, bạn chấm bao nhiêu điểm cho hành trình của họ. Và nếu bạn muốn nghe thêm những câu chuyện tình yêu đầy cảm xúc như thế này, đừng quên like, subscribe và chia sẻ video để lan tỏa những điều ấm áp đến nhiều người hơn. Hẹn gặp lại bạn ở những câu chuyện kế tiếp nơi mỗi nỗi đau đều tìm thấy bình yên và mỗi trái tim đều có cơ hội được yêu thêm một lần nữa. 3 years had passed since Sloan returned from her second exhibition. They still lived in the house of sunlight, where lavender bloomed every summer. Willa was now 5, bright, curious, and endlessly full of questions, just like her mother. Each morning, she ran into the garden with Vincent, gathering fallen lavender blossoms and asking in her small, serious voice, "Daddy, do flowers sleep?" Vincent smiled, kissing her hair. "They do. When you close your eyes, they close theirs too." If note. Sloan sat by the window, sketching the scene, the man, and the little girl in a garden drenched with light. She realized that if wholeness ever had a shape, she lived inside it. Vincent had become a guest lecturer at a small university, teaching ethics in business. Students loved him not for grand theories, but for how he spoke honestly about failure, loss, and redemption. One asked, "Professor, if you could go back, would you change your decision?" Vincent smiled. "No, because if I hadn't lost everything, I would never have learned what it means to have everything." Every afternoon, he drove home along tree-lined roads, peace settling deeper in his chest. At the gate, Willa would always be waiting, shouting, "Daddy, I finished my drawing." And Sloan, in her soft cotton dress, smiled in a way that made him forget every kind of tiredness. One autumn evening, the three sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. Willa asked, "Daddy, when I grow up, can I be a painter like Mommy?" "If that's what you love, of course you can. And if I want to be like you." Vincent paused, then smiled. "Then be someone even better." Sloan turned to look at him, her eyes shimmering in the moonlight. "You know, some of the things you say, she'll remember them for life," he answered quietly. "I just hope she remembers that love never goes out of style." Oh, the autumn breeze carried the scent of lavender and their daughter's laughter out into the dark. In that moment, Vincent knew he had come full circle, arriving exactly where he was always meant to be. Months later, Sloan found out she was pregnant again. Vincent got the news while in class. He froze mid-lecture, smiling so wide he couldn't speak. That night, he held her close and whispered, "You almost made me lose it in front of everyone." Sloan laughed softly. "You once said fear doesn't mean weakness, it means what you're afraid to lose is too precious." "Then I'll be afraid forever," he said. if that means loving you. This pregnancy was more complicated than the first. Sloan was often exhausted and had to stay in bed. Vincent put aside most of his work to care for her. He learned to cook, soothe Willa, and be the steady heartbeat she could rest on. One night, Sloan woke to find him sitting beside the bed, reading under the warm glow of a lamp, his hand still holding hers. He looked up and smiled. "I can't sleep when you breathe so heavily. You don't have to worry about every little thing. If I don't worry, what else would I do? You're my whole world now." Sloan gazed at him. That same man who had once abandoned everything for ambition was now content just listening to two heartbeats beside his own. In January, their second child arrived on a morning blanketed in snow, a boy with pink cheeks, dark hair like Sloan's, and grey eyes like Vincent's. They named him Hope James Devereaux, a reminder of the two things that had brought them home: hope and family. Willa held her baby brother for the first time and whispered in her tiny voice, "He smells like cookies." Vincent laughed and kissed her head. "That's because he was made from love." Fatherhood the second time around was chaos and wonder. Vincent barely slept, yet never felt more alive. Every time he held Hope, he understood more deeply happiness wasn't about how much he had, but how much he was trusted to love. Sloan recovered slowly but glowed brighter each day. One morning, with snow melting outside, she opened her eyes to see Vincent standing by the window, holding their baby as sunlight poured in. The golden light fell across his shoulders, and she thought she had never seen him so still, so whole. "You know," she whispered, "I used to dream of seeing you like this." Vincent turned, smiling, "And I used to dream you'd forgive me like this." They both laughed, tears running down not from sadness, but from the peace after every storm. 5 years later, Hope was 5, and Willa 10. Sloan opened the biggest exhibition of her life, The Light We Keep. 0. The opening night was packed. At the center of the gallery hung a painting of their house at sunset, the door wide open, two children playing in the yard, Vincent and Sloan sitting together on the porch. Below it was a single line: "For the one who taught me that light doesn't come from the sun, but from those who choose to stay." When the lights dimmed, Vincent came to stand beside her. He didn't speak, he took her hand. She looked around: friends, strangers, applause, yet the only sound she truly heard was his heartbeat beside her. He leaned close and murmured, "You know, I used to be afraid I wasn't enough to keep you. Now I thank you for never letting go." Sloan smiled. "You don't need to be perfect to hold on, just real." That night, as they drove home, Willa slept in the back seat and Hope leaned against Sloan's shoulder. Vincent drove slowly down the leaf-strewn road, golden streetlights spilling across the windshield like fragments of memory. Sloan looked out the window and said softly, 10 years ago, I never imagined this ending." Vincent replied, voice quiet as wind, "Neither did I. But maybe God rewrites our stories with the pieces we once broke." When they pulled up to the house of sunlight, Vincent carried Hope. Sloan lifted Willa, and together they stepped through the old wooden door. Inside, a single lamp clicked on automatically, that same warm, honey-colored light wrapping around them like an embrace. Vincent turned to her and whispered, "This is the last light I'll ever need." Sloan rested her head against his shoulder. "No, Vincent, this isn't the last light. It's where every light begins." She kissed him, soft as a promise, light as a prayer. Inside, their children laughed in their dreams. Outside, the lavender swayed in the night breeze, purple, fragrant, and steadfast as the love that had built this home. And there, in the little house of sunlight, the light never dimmed, not because of fire, but because of two souls who had learned the most sacred truth: how to stay. This was the journey of Vincent Devereaux, a man who once had everything, lost it all, and then found himself again in the arms of the woman he loved more than life itself. From the cold penthouses of Manhattan to a small home washed in sunlight, he learned that success isn't about standing at the top, but about sitting beside the one you love and saying, simply, "I'm staying." If you've listened this far, thank you for walking through this story of love, forgiveness, and light. Tell us what you felt. How would you rate their journey? And if you'd like to hear more heartfelt love stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so that warmth can reach more hearts. See you in the next story. where every pain finds its peace and every heart gets one more chance to love.